We are officially live on Facebook for the Tuesday edition of the Not Your Average Investor Show. Today, we are talking about what NFL teams have to do with real estate investment and why you should care. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez. With me, as always, the man that I affectionately like to call GC because he's got the genius concepts, knows how to generate cash flows. He's a great co-host, and because his name is Greg Cohen. Say hello, Greg.
Hello, everybody. Fantastic to be with you today.
We got our community manager, Madison, in the house, as always. Madison the Magnificent, MTM with the moments that matter. Say hello, Madison.
Hello, everybody.
And guest of honor in studio today. Very excited to have this gentleman here. He is one of 8, son of a World War II veteran, carpenter, right? Like youngest ever team president of a Major League Baseball team. One of very few sports team presidents with a World Series trophy and a Super Bowl ring. President of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Mark Lampkin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Very fortunate to be in good situations, the right place at the right time, and the beneficiary of a lot of great fortune.
I think you were the beneficiary, and I think the people that you've served have been great beneficiaries of you being there running a tight ship, man. I think we're honored to have you.
Well, thank you very much. Great to be here.
We like to start with a little tradition that we have here where we welcome everybody. If you are listening on the podcast, if you are watching on YouTube, we love having you. But the right way to do it is you go to nyais.com, join us live here for a live show, and you get to be part of what?
The roll call.
The roll call. You ready for a roll call, Mark?
All set.
Here we go. Madison already welcoming everybody. Welcome to the Not Your Average Investor Show. We got Denny Davis over in Germany saying Guten Tag, go Jags. We got our leadoff hitter batting second today, John Henning saying good afternoon. We got the MVP of the Not Your Average Investor Show community, Lee Bishop, wishing everyone a great afternoon. We got the ringmaster of the community, Drew Barnhill, saying good afternoon. We got Mark McDermott. He's back saying hello to all. We got the fairy godmother of the community, Jen fills in saying greetings from Monterey, California, JWB family. And it's Jen's birthday today.
No way.
Happy birthday, Jen.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, well, a special show for you, Jen. We got Tony D in the house. Anthony Dida from Jupiter. Greetings, friends. We got Bill Shields with his trademark. Buenas tardes, amigos y amiga. Buenas tardes, Bill Shields. Good to have you. We got Joanna Batista joining us from the Philippines. Good evening, JWB family. We got a regular, Rosalind Riley, saying good morning, everyone, from Marietta, California. We got Marilyn Cotterman checking in from Homosassa, Florida.
That's the home of the manatees. Did you know that?
I do know that.
Home.
There you go.
No, it's worldwide. Home of the manatees, Homosassa, Florida. We got the man everyone knows, Noah Randari. Hello, everyone. Greetings from California. We got Dean Curry checking in from Columbus, Ohio. Dean, good to have you back. We got Janer Neva in the house. Wishing everybody hello, everybody. New name?
Is that
a new name? New name?
New name? Okay. I think it's a new name. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show, Janer. Let me know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I am famous for messing that up. We got Eddie Harris checking in from Hotlanta. Eddie, good to have you back. We got Chris Gonzaga from the illustrious Hudson Valley, New York. He's saying great day, everyone. Who else we got? We got Stevie B in the house. Stevie B, welcome back. Jane Terracano.
Mama Jane.
The original investor.
Alex, my business partner. That's his mom.
Mama
Jane.
Mama Jane is in the house. Who else we got in here? We got David Blattner saying hi all from Massachusetts. He's back. Everybody's wishing Jen here in the chat a happy birthday. We love it, Jen. So pumped that we could celebrate your birthday. We got David Baird back in the house. Hi, y'all. We got Ken and Carolyn Moline, the patriarch and matriarch of the first family of the Not Your Average Investor Show community. We salute you. It feels so much more ridiculous when there's somebody else here.
Yeah,
we got Nadeem Shah from the West Coast saying happy birthday, Jen. And all right, we're good. We're good with the roll call. Enough with those shenanigans, Mark. Let's get right back to tax. You are the president of a football team. Everybody loves talking football. But what I think most people don't realize is that a professional sports franchise operation is largely a real estate play, right? Can you tell us a little bit about how real estate fits into what you do at the Jags?
Absolutely. Well, our first responsibility is to do everything we can to put a product on the field that our fans will be proud of. That's number one. Number two is to make sure that the fans that choose to follow the Jaguars, that come to the games, have a great experience, when they go to the game. And our third responsibility is really where the real estate comes in, is the obligation we have to ensure we have a stable, financially strong, both on and off the field, franchise here in Northeast Florida. And, part of that equation to accomplish that third objective is by trying to do everything we can to support the community and to create ancillary revenue streams to help support the team. So real estate is sort of a natural extension of that. Obviously, we have a big real estate relationship with the city of Jacksonville, and that we lease the stadium from the city. But beyond that, we do believe that to a degree, more people live downtown Jacksonville, more people work downtown, more people visit downtown, that the end result of that will be, helping downtown Jacksonville realize its full potential. And to the extent that happens, then the football team will certainly be a beneficiary of that. So, we've always described ourselves a little bit as a little bit of the reluctant developer. There's experts at it like your guys' organization and many others that are similarly focused on downtown. But, sometimes it takes somebody that, might be willing to take a bigger risk to try to do something that can be catalytic that, but for, that type of pioneering entrepreneurial financial commitment, the project probably won't happen. So, that's why we've been focused, so much on trying to do something different in downtown Jacksonville on the banks of the St. Johns River, bringing a Four Seasons hotel to Jacksonville and hoping to be the catalyst for what can happen in and around the sports complex. And we've already seen the impact of that, particularly with your company that's done so much in that area. So, you're seeing great anticipation as to what's going to happen in and around the sports complex with the opening of the Four Seasons Hotel, and we're building a new office building and renovating the marina. And all of those have already had positive impacts on property values in and around. And you're also seeing people make a greater and greater investments. So, a really long answer to a very short question, but that's why real estate's important to us.
Well, I think it's a perfect segue into the topic I really wanted to give you the chance to shed a little more light on, because most of our audience here doesn't actually live in Jacksonville. They invest here, but they live in California, New York, or in different parts of the world. And they really don't know the untapped potential. They don't understand the North Bank and the lack of development that is there. The Shipyards project is this huge, it's probably the symbol of untapped potential for Jacksonville for decades up until now. Could you give people a little bit more insight into what the Shipyards has been and then what the Shipyards will become under your leadership?
Well, Jacksonville, located a half a mile via the St. Johns River from the Atlantic Ocean. So it's a strategic location for military purposes. There's two naval air stations that are both on the banks of the St. Johns River, one by the Atlantic Ocean and one further inland. And as such, shipbuilding and ship maintenance and the port activities have always been a really big part of what Jacksonville is all about. Part of that is because you have this tremendously wide river, the St. Johns River, which goes from the Atlantic Ocean and it terminates around Orlando. Mm-hmm. And so it's always been a big Navy town. It's always been a big shipping town. It's been a big naval repair, shipping repair. And that's why we call this area the Shipyards, because basically that's what it was for generations. Downtown Jacksonville was a very industrial area focused primarily on, repair of ships.
Right.
And, once the shipbuilding found its way to easier areas to get to, you had this great void of property that's literally right on the banks of the St. Johns River, very close to downtown Jacksonville, and all of it owned by the city of Jacksonville.
Right.
And, over the years, there's been efforts to develop on that property. Those projects have been start and stop. They've usually stopped as the economy went into a downturn.
Right.
Which really puts us to, where we are today with a tremendous amount of property available. The city's desire to develop the property, the city's desire to be very thoughtful in terms of the development combined with, a really world-class park experience. And, it's been available for probably 20 years for development. And there hasn't been, a party that's willing to come up and be able to put a financial program together that balances the risk and the reward.
Right.
So it's a pioneering development, and as such, the return expectations from the investors should be higher than typically they would be. And whether it was due to financial situations or an inability of the city to be able to put a package together. Even though there were a lot of really well-intended entities that wanted to do something in the shipyards area, none of them could really pull it off financially. So, Shad has been here, the owner of the Jaguars, for 10 years. And, we've been an interested observer because, we know if downtown Jacksonville can become much more vibrant than it is today. Great progress is being made.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of people that are investing in downtown Jacksonville with a lot of great projects. But if we're able to really get to the point where downtown, realize its full potential, as I said earlier, the Jaguars are going to benefit from that. So we looked at this void. We also looked at the market here in Jacksonville. There's really no five-star luxury hotels in downtown Jacksonville. There's some in the region, but none in downtown Jacksonville. And there's no really high-end waterfront condominium products in downtown Jacksonville. And Shad believed that filling those niches, we're not competing with anything that's currently here. That was important to him. We wanted to be significantly additive to the economy and to be able to bring those types of products here and have them serve as a catalyst, and have Shad be able to look at this investment and not necessarily calculate his return based on what the hotel and the condominiums are actually going to generate on a cash-on-cash basis. There's other values that if this is successful, there's other value that will be created that will be realized elsewhere. It'll be a big step in helping stabilize from a financial perspective the franchise for decades to come.
That's really interesting.
GC, can you move your mic a little closer to your mouth?
Absolutely. That's really interesting that you pointed out that last fact, because what I'm hearing from you there is there's other ways for the franchise to be able to earn a return on investment if this thing works. And I'm just coming up with this, so tell me if I'm way off, but that would limit the amount of asks that, the Jags would have to ask of the city as far as incentives versus another developer, because, they don't have to make as big of a return as maybe another developer would, again, because you have other ways to be able to produce a return on investment from it. Am I thinking right there?
Absolutely. And it's sort of priming the pump a little bit. And again, we're priming the pump. And if Shad's investment in this project, began at about $300 million. And now as we've gone through the realities of what's happening with the construction market and some of the global unrest in the financial markets and, just what's happened in terms of some of the remnants of the supply chain issues. What was a $300 million investment is now close to $400 million, with I'd be not ashamed to say it, low single digit returns,
Right.
So nothing that a typical real estate developer or an real estate investor would be interested in. But, Shad views it, a little differently. He views it as, look, if this thing can be cash flow positive, which we really believe it will, we think it'll do better than, what most people would suggest it would. It's going to provide great momentum, and it's going to increase the momentum that's already happening in downtown Jacksonville. And, there's no reason why a community as strong as Jacksonville shouldn't aspire to have great things downtown. Staying at a five-star hotel is not for everybody, but it is for a portion of the population. And that's important to be able to add that to the offerings in downtown Jacksonville.
I find it fascinating. It didn't hit me until literally we're sitting down for this conversation and you started talking the parallels, right? Like the idea that for a urban center to come online the way that we expect it, right? Like it's very easy to see a beautiful canvas of waterfront and think, man, how has this not happened yet?
Right.
And for here nor there, right? Like I'm newer to Jacksonville. I understand that there's been generations of folks that have been like, yeah, Jacksonville downtown's coming and it's not really going to come. This idea that what a downtown really needs in order for it to develop in a sustainable manner that's going to help the overall population as a whole, it needs a business, or in this case, a pair of businesses that have something to gain from the peripheries of the deal, not the X's and O's, not the Excel sheet of the inside the property line, but things that happen outside of the property line that they are incentivized to want to care about because of another business model that's there that can gain creates this great situation, right? The Jags gain from this by elevated, visitorship, a better fan experience, more people, more pumped to the games. JWB is, we've had this conversation all the time. You talk about this idea. We have plenty of people in the chat that are like, can we invest in JWB projects? And Greg's like, this is like a 1 or 2% return project.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't for you, man. This is for us because we have 45 properties around the urban center that are all going to benefit, and the macroeconomy benefits from raising median incomes, right? But like this idea that Jacksonville has 3 really big things going for them. One, the Jags, right? Like the idea that a small city gets an NFL franchise in the urban center is a really, really big deal. 2, another company that is also very long-term aligned, that is willing to come in and build a rapport and put the money into renovating these properties and actively place make the way that JWB is making. And then the other thing is this idea that, I'm from Miami, man. Like our waterfront is not accessible, right? Like everybody built right on the waterfront, and there is no sharing of the waterfront to create these wonderful open spaces that are come. So this like beautiful canvas that Jacksonville has, plus, at least 2 partners that are thinking about this thing long term is a really, really exciting thing to kind of all put together that just doesn't happen everywhere with as much space to do. And there's so much to be excited about, right? So like, if I could ask you, what excites you the most about this stuff that is happening? Is there something that you think about from a resident standpoint, right? From like your family being able to like enjoy this stuff, and or as an economic development, like I know that Alex, his partner, talks about he wants his son to graduate college and move to Jacksonville, right? What is there something for you in it that like that really rings true as far as a beneficiary of this thing as a civilian?
Well, I obviously you want to live in a community that has a great heartbeat at its center, that sort of represents the soul of the community. We've got such an expansive city in Jacksonville. So I think it's still the largest landmass city, in the country. And, we go out to the ocean, we go deep inland, and, but, even though people are spread out all over, I think great communities do have, a natural gathering place, and I think that typically should be a downtown. We also have, other external factors that are working well. One, there's been a great migration of people into Northeast Florida since COVID, particularly from the Northeast. And you also have, the idea that, whether it's, young adults or whether it's empty nesters, they all love the idea of living in a walkable environment. And, it takes a lot. So what encourages us at this point in time is it appears there's, for the first time in quite some time, a great alignment of interest. You have investors like Shad that's willing to do something that, typically you're going to have trouble finding an investor to do that. But Shad's motivated by 2 things. One, he's motivated by, will there be some knock-on benefit to the football team if downtown Jacksonville does well? We believe it will be. But also, Shad takes seriously his responsibility to the community, and he really believes the best thing that he can do for a community is to create jobs. So, Shad's aligned. This area is next to the stadium. He has a really close relationship with the Four Seasons team. He owns the flagship Four Seasons in Toronto, and then you have other investors that are very aggressive in downtown, DWB being obviously one of them, but there's a lot of them, as you know,
Yeah.
Which is a great thing.
Absolutely.
And there never should be one entity that's carrying the whole thing. And then you have the city of Jacksonville, which I think is really understanding the fact that you can't catch up on the infrastructure. You got to get the infrastructure done first in order to enable the development to follow. You can't wait for the development to get done, then all of a sudden work on the infrastructure, because then you have many respects a failed development.
Right.
There's no place for people to park. The traffic is flowing the wrong way. All those types of things. And then I think there's also been, a lot of really well-intended public stewards that really want to make sure that, the waterfront remains open and accessible. And so, the downtown riverfront park advocates have played a really important role in this process. And I think finally, everyone is on the same page in terms of what's the right balance of bringing great accessible parks to everyone in the community, that gives you access to this beautiful historic river, and combining that with a responsible, appropriate level of development. And I think having all four of those things combined is why there's probably more optimism than there's ever been about downtown Jacksonville. Now we just need to make sure that we take full advantage of it before the markets turn the wrong way.
Well, I'm with you on the optimism thing as well. I mean, I moved here in 2006 and I saw some optimism in 2006. And then I saw when the real estate crash happened, and of course, optimism went away. And then of course, since then, even the people that are closest, that are locals here, have a healthy degree of pessimism, I think, because they're so close, right? Sometimes you have to see it from somebody who has seen very successful organizations and successful downtowns, and being in St. Louis, being in New York. I feel like outside people can see what we have here better than sometimes the people that are closest. Would you agree?
Well, I can tell you that I have that very same experience, and it sort of starts with what we have to offer here in Jacksonville and Northeast Florida. I think if you were fortunate enough to be born here and raised here, it's natural that you would sort of become very used to it.
Right.
And, I spent most of my life in St. Louis and then 4 years in New York before I came down here. And the combination of what you have here in Jacksonville, the amount of property, the healthcare infrastructure is unbelievable,
right,
which is really important for people in my generation. You have this natural resources that are somewhat unrivaled. You got the beaches, you got the rivers, you've got so many great things.
Yeah, I call it Orange County, California 40 years ago.
Yeah. And, people are starting to see that. And a lot of times it takes people to move down here to say, oh my goodness, you guys are so fortunate to live here. I can't believe you have all this. And just the idea of, being able to go to places very quickly from Jacksonville. In fact, I gave a talk last night to, group up at Amelia Island, and 45 minutes from here, beautiful resort area. So you have and plus you have this mix of housing stock, that you have the old historic homes that are really classic in their architecture and deserve to be protected and renovated. And then you have, beach homes, and you've got just this wide variety of neighborhoods to which to choose from. So I think you're 100% correct. And I think that you're actually seeing that as much on sort of the investment side, where sometimes it takes somebody from the outside to make a huge investment, and then everybody's saying, you know what, why didn't we do that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you've seen some of the big time developers that have typically not come to Jacksonville in the past. Now they're coming, the related group, the New York firm, it escapes my mind, but who just put in the RFP for the tower at Riverfront Plaza. You start getting some of these big time developers coming in, then everybody's like, oh, wait a second, what do they know that I haven't been paying attention to, right?
Well, I think some of the big markets, have gotten, I wouldn't say overbuilt, but the competition for investment is harder and harder than it's ever been. And in the past, Jacksonville was a market that never really got on the radar.
Right.
But now, because in some cases you're reaching some saturation and just the cost of development has gotten so high, money finds its way to other markets where, there's great opportunity. And I think that's why you've seen the influx of dollars. And again, you've made an exceptional point. When you see Related being really aggressive in this market, that tells you something. There's an entity out of Valdosta, Georgia, a smaller company called Rise, that actually moved their corporate headquarters here. I think they have 7 or 8 projects going in Jacksonville right now, and you can't go up and down the street without running into a multifamily project under construction here in Jacksonville.
I wanted to kind of hit on that because obviously we're a small part of this, right? Our commitment to downtown Jacksonville and the projects that we've taken down over the last couple of years. But you also mentioned there's this alignment of interest, right? And there have been a lot of things that when I look at from a public perspective are done to enable smaller and mid-sized developers to actually take down projects. And I wanted, if I could get you to comment just a little bit, we're so blessed to have the Jags being able to take down the shipyards, which I don't think there's anybody else that could really do that. But could you comment on how important it is for smaller developers and mid-sized developers to maybe take that building across from City Hall that's been vacant for 30 years and turn that into, a great restaurant and maybe 20, single family apartments or things like that? Could you talk about the role of smaller developers in this as well?
Well, they're critically important. It's, it sort of takes a village. I don't want to use an overused phrase, but one entity not only shouldn't they be doing everything, they don't have the internal capacity to be doing everything. Of
course not.
You guys are exceptional. Maybe you can have 10 or 15 projects going on at the same time, but that's very unusual.
Yeah.
So if we're really going to make progress, you have to have as many opportunities for developers to be able to get in. And then in order to do that, you still have to recognize that, this isn't a suburban greenfield strip mall type project. It's not a multifamily project where the risk profile is really understood and low. There is a somewhat higher risk profile. So that means a couple things. One, developers need to believe, but then the other entities involved, in this case, we're talking about the public entities, need to help make that possible.
Exactly.
And whether that's through the investment in infrastructure or things as simple as making sure they have enough staff so that when you have a development proposal that is going through the approval process at the city, that they have enough staff to be able to deal with it.
Mhm.
We don't, because of who we are and the fact that we're not looking to do 10 or 15 projects, we're looking to do a couple that are really transformative for downtown. The scale of our projects they're, like I said, the Four Seasons project's $400 million and it's just shot. So we get a lot of attention when you're coming forward with a big project like that. But if you're coming forward with a $5 million, $7 million, a $20 million project, and you're not getting the attention, I think that is somewhat short-sighted. And I know that the city has taken steps to help deal with that by adding staff. And also, understand that investing in parks and investing in traffic and investing in parking and investing in energy infrastructure, investing in public transportation, all of those have a economic development application to them. And that also brings about people's more confidence in investing because they don't have to worry about sort of the normal stuff that can end up killing a project.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
Oh man, I love being a part of this conversation. Thanks, guys. I'm hearing a couple of things, right? Like I'm hearing this idea that there is a couple of stakeholders here that are necessary for this thing. There's a giant opportunity that is necessary for the thing, and then it's this balance of stuff that has to come together. We talked about the developers a little bit. You just mentioned the public side of it. When we were first having this conversation, you said that it was a courage thing, right? Like this is not an obvious thing to everybody. Developers and the public side of this thing alike need to have a certain amount of vision and to stand behind something and take a little bit of a risk in a way. You want to tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, it's hard sometimes to have the courage of your conviction, particularly if you're an elected official, when you really want to focus on an undeveloped part of the community that has had a lot of focus over the years, but may not be that important to people that live a half hour or 45 minutes from downtown Jacksonville.
Yeah.
So they may say, I'm not really worried about that. All I want you to do is make sure you fix the potholes out by us. And if there's really a need to invest in that type of infrastructure, let the developers do it, because that's, you have these impact fees in a lot of other areas where the project can maybe be able to absorb that.
Right.
That the projects in these areas can't absorb that. You can't expect the public sector to be doing the investment that the private sector should do. So you end up, if you're not careful, you end up at an impasse where if one doesn't get done, the other can't happen. And so that's why I said it takes courage of elected officials sometimes to really step up. And you can see that right now, particularly as it relates to Mayor Curry's budget that he just submitted. Significant investment in terms of infrastructure, in terms of parks, in terms of the types of things that you need to have. There was advancement in terms of a very controversial gas tax, which then pours money back into public transportation, which is so important. And whether it's what's happening on the riverfront, or what's happening with the Emerald Trail that goes throughout the community, that's great in terms of giving people access, and it's great in terms of giving people a reason to get off Highway 95 when they're driving from the Northeast down to Miami, to get off and do something. But what people sometimes don't understand how valuable it is that once you do that, you're creating great economic development value that makes it easier for developers to come in and to be able to get a reasonable, risk adjusted return by coming into that market. Because absent that getting done, it's,
They're just gonna sit.
unless you get someone who's just a benevolent investor, and you can't build a great city on the backs of benevolence.
Give you an example, exactly what you're talking about. Prior to the Downtown Investment Authority raising the amount of incentive dollars for us to renovate an existing building, that there was a cap on that at $1 million for the longest time. And then the city, the Downtown Investment Authority, realized that if they kept that cap at $1 million, that there's no way that the numbers could pencil out for a developer like JWB to come in and to renovate a building that's been vacant for 30 years. And so, they raised that amount. They use a return on investment calculation to determine the incentives that are necessary and that they're willing to give. And then incentive dollars can go up over $1 million. Well, the incentive dollars that we receive on some of our projects are, $8 million, $10 million. I mean, that's $8 or $10 million in incentives that we get, but our return on investment is still estimated to be about 2% of a return on investment, right? There's a whole lot of investors out there that would not accept taking a 2% return on investment, to do a multi-million-dollar renovation on a building that's been vacant for 30 years. So it's just to your point right there. If we hadn't had this public alignment, right, this public, ability to be able to help developers, help the city, these buildings would just be vacant, and we wouldn't have this type of economic development.
And the reality is, and using your example, you're willing to take the risk, and you're willing to have some dollars, not be working as hard as they should be, because you believe if it's successful, then you're going to reap the reward someplace else. So it can't, it's not, we can't paint these as, hey, we're just coming in here and we're willing to invest this money and not make a return. That's not necessarily exactly what's going on. What's going on is you're willing to take a really high level of risk. And if you're successful, you're going to get a way lower than market return, but you're going to benefit from that in other areas, whether it's future projects and,
Exactly.
you've got a risky project, but then you maybe have access to some property close by, which if that risky project goes well, then you're going to be able to get market returns, maybe market plus returns on that next project. And in our particular case, because we're not, trying to do a lot of projects, the value that's being created by, Shad making this investment, accepting really, really low return on his investment, is that he truly believes that it's going to be a very important catalyst for downtown Jacksonville. And to the degree downtown Jacksonville succeeds, the Jaguars will be the beneficiary of that in some way. And that it does create value. It's off the pro forma of the hotel, but it does exist.
Exactly. I love it.
I love it. And I love the, you mentioned public spaces a lot, right? Like this areas where people congregate. I think as Americans, we're not used to seeing great public spaces in a city, right? But you go to Europe and you go to other places that were built by, a monarchy that didn't have to be developer driven, and you find that that's where it becomes this like amenity for the city, right? Like it becomes this place where everybody comes together and great value is created. And around it nowadays, when you see these developers pairing with the public and creating these public spaces, it creates this amenity that then creates these outsized returns for the real estate investments around it and the quality of life, and everybody wins. And it makes me think of, this great collaboration of downtown vision and how the Jaguars bought into this thing in order to bring not just public space amenities, but programming and stuff like that. GC, do you want to kind of frame that a little bit to tell everybody?
Yeah, I thought so. I was just thinking about our conversation before having the opportunity to sit down with you, and I was trying to think of just very tangible, just wins of just an alignment of interest and how appreciative we are of the Jags being here, and specifically the Jags and the leadership of the Jags. I wanted to share this story about an advocacy group called Build Up Downtown. And so for our audience, a lot of you saw us last week talk about the grand opening and the ribbon cutting of the Van Gogh Museum. And this is an amenity that we're talking about coming downtown. Well, I wanted to tell you just the impact that the Jags had in Build Up Downtown and this amenity coming. About a year ago, my business partner, Alex, came up with this idea. And he said, you know what, I think downtown needs an advocacy group so that we can bring amenities into downtown and we can do a lot of other good things for downtown. And so we actually approached Mark and his group here at the Jags, and we asked them to support build up downtown, this advocacy group. And so, I don't know in what other organization, in what other cities, a relatively small developer, a small to medium-sized business can go to an NFL franchise and ask them to buy into this vision. And one, that they would actually listen, and two, that they would say yes. And the Jags said yes, and they make an annual contribution to build up downtown, as well as JWB and a couple of other founding partners. And so the way that this relates to the Van Gogh Museum is that this group, Build Up Downtown, was incredibly instrumental in attracting this amenity coming into downtown. They did all the work up front. They were doing work. I was at the ribbon cutting. They were doing work. We were going and cutting the ribbon at 9:28. They were doing work until 9:27 to pull this thing off. I mean, it was unbelievable. And that stuff just would not have been done. So I just wanted to say thank you. I thought this is such a cool, tangible example of how you're so approachable. The Jags are so approachable. And I just don't ever want to take that for granted. That's just not normal. So thank you so much for that.
Well, as I said earlier, we receive a tremendous amount from this community, particularly from the heart and the passion of the residents here. And we certainly take seriously our responsibility to give back to the community. And, as I said, Shad's focus is trying to do everything that he can to help create jobs. And if he creates jobs, that's going to have such a great benefit in terms of the impact it's going to have on families, particularly those families that are in unresourced neighborhoods, neighborhoods that have been neglected for so long. It's part of our responsibility.
It's a special relationship that you have. I was looking at some of those donations that you've given just in the last year or two to some of those communities, $1 million to lift Jacks to help out the Out East community. I think there's $5 million that Shad just gave to the Museum of Science and History here to have that come to the North Bank. I mean, this is a true partnership with the city of Jacksonville, and I think we're lucky to have the Jags in your leadership.
Well, I tell you what, we're lucky to have. We're lucky to have the Khan family here in Jacksonville,
Right?
Because none of this happens without the commitment of Shad, his wife, and Tony and Shauna.
This is how business in the public-private partnership should be done, right? I'm very inspired by this conversation and just the ability of the right people coming together to do the right things for economic development for the community is just really wonderful to be a part of. We're gonna do a little rapid fire Q&A. You ready, Mark?
Sure,
We got
sure.
this from the audience.
I've got my answers ready, so just ask me whatever you want.
I got Gerard Wendling is asking you, as a Colts fan, can you please explain the mojo voodoo that the Jaguars have over the Colts?
That's crazy. And we experience a very similar thing when we go to Indy each year. I don't think it's of this extent, but it's just unexplainable.
Yeah.
Because the Colts are a great organization. They've consistently been high performers, except when they need to be low performers to draft somebody like Andrew Luck.
True.
But no, I can't explain that. It's a true anomaly.
That's awesome. As a Dolphins fan, I feel like everybody has mojo voodoo over us, so I get it. Denny Davis asking, I guess we kind of talked about this, but Denny's asking, is JWB in direct partnership with Shad and or the Jags or any downtown projects, or are you unwed partners working towards the same overall strategic goal?
I think we're unwed partners that are working towards the same strategic goal, and Shad has had a lot of people that when they hear about the projects that he's doing, the Four Seasons and this office building and the marina and things like that, they say, boy, if Shad's investing in it, maybe we should see if they need some capital. And number one, once people learn about it, they say, well, we'll let you do that. And Shad really feels like he should go this one on his own, because he doesn't, there could very easily be rocky roads ahead, and if you may have a project that might be upside down financially for a few years, and Shad just doesn't want to have to rely on other investors to help him meet those cash needs. So no, we all believe in downtown, and there's many others that aren't at the table today that have similar beliefs.
Awesome. All right. Lee Bishop wants to know, Mark, do you invest in turnkey rental income properties anywhere, or do you invest in other real estate yourself?
I invest a little bit. I'm a very passive investor, but I am in some multifamily stuff in a few markets around the country. But that's just because it's recommended and brought to me by my financial advisor.
Interesting. All right, cool. And Chris Gonzaga asks a question. Any incentives from state or federal or future development downtown, taxes, low interest rates, et cetera? Are there, what are the public incentives, I guess is what he's asking about, if you want to talk about that now.
Well, there's, in our projects, which are hotel, office building, and maybe some mixed use to come, there really aren't a lot of direct federal incentives that are out there. There might be the opportunity for some infrastructure dollars through some of the federal programs. There's still a lot of funding out there for investment in infrastructure. Some of those can help make projects possible, but they're not, developers not a direct beneficiary of that. As far as the state level is concerned, for our projects, there really isn't a lot. A lot of those incentives through Enterprise Florida are focused more in terms of trying to attract businesses to Florida. We're already here. And then at the city level, where there are a number of programs available, they fall into the areas of a rebate on property taxes that are paid in the future, what are known as REP grants down here. There are occasionally infrastructure investments that are made. And then depending upon the city's assessment of what your ROI on the project is, you may or may not qualify for what's known as a completion grant. And in the Four Seasons project, the majority of our incentives fall into the area of REV grants, which is really a rebate of property taxes that we'll be paying in the future. We were able to get free property from the city as part of this. So that was a city contribution. I know we had a completion grant, but again, all of those were without question, but for investments, the project can't happen. In our case, we were so below what the allowable return was to the developer. The DIA on a project like this, they'll have what they believe is the appropriate hurdle rate for the developer's return.
Right.
And if you exceed that, then you don't qualify for incentives. We qualified for significantly more than what we got, but again, it was just a capacity question. And quite honestly, Shad really didn't want to really push this particular one.
Very interesting. That's really, really cool. We're going to get you out of here early, Mark. I just, before we get out of here, anything else? Is there any kind of like word of wisdom? You've had this remarkable career. You've had success at so many different levels. Is there anything that you are passionate about to give to advice to a young girl or a young boy that kind of wants to follow in your footsteps, anything like that?
Wow. I think, and I share this with a lot of people that I work with, is that, as you go through life, you're probably going to meet or interact with someone that is probably going to have a big impact and change your life. The unfortunate thing is that you don't know it at the time. I had a situation where I had a youth soccer coach that I had a really good relationship with, and he ended up making an unbelievable impact in my life because he happened to become the president of Anheuser-Busch. So that implies a lot of things. It implies be really sincere and honest in your dealings with people, because you never know, that person that you're interacting with, you don't know it at the time, but that may be the person that may have the opportunity to change your life. So, treat everybody as if they're going to be a life changer. And as hard as it is sometimes, never burn any bridges. It's so easy sometimes, and particularly in today's environment where you can shoot off a tweet or send an email and just on a whim, and you feel good about it maybe for 30 seconds, and sometimes for 30 minutes, probably never 30 days, and then you look back and say, why did I do that? I mean, where did it get me? So I don't know. Those are things that I've been on both sides of those and done things that I shouldn't have done, and upon reflection said, maybe you should have handled that differently. So those are the things I probably would suggest. Treat everybody well, because you never know who's going to impact your life. And, before you decide to fire off something nasty to someone, send it to yourself and look at it the next morning.
Wise words, right? Lean into relationships and think long term. I love it. I love it. Mark, really, thank you for coming. This has been amazing. Is there any kind of like charitable donation or any cause that you are passionate that people can like donate to if they want to show gratitude for being on the show?
No, I appreciate that. I would, what I would suggest people do if they feel the inclination to donate to their favorite charities. That'll be a way that they can make really good decisions on where the dollar should go.
Love that. Love that. GC, I'll give you kind of last words, but I want to thank our audience for being here, our community that, normally is driving the conversation, but today we had a guest that, we really had to pick your brain. There's 32 of you out there, right? Presidents of NFL football teams. So it's really an honor to have you here. It's just great to have our community in the house. We had over 40 people with us for, close to an hour on a Tuesday, middle of your workday. We never take that for granted that you keep showing up. If you're listening on the podcast, you're watching on YouTube, join us one of these days. Go to nyais.com, join us live, get to pick the brain of a business leader like Mark, or just regular folks like us, and meet somebody in the chat here. I'll kick it over to you, GC, for last words, man.
Well, I just think this is such a momentous day for our community. We started this community about 2.5 years ago, and the vision was to be able to, provide value and education, but it was to be able to create access for individuals like yourself, really pillars of the community. And when I think about what today is, I think this is just an incredible win for our community. I want to say thank you to everybody for taking your time to be here. Mark, thank you so much for being here. This is, all of the little things and the big things that the Jags do really matter. Like, for example, Mark didn't have to actually come in studio today, right? He could have very easily taken this call, virtual. I just wanted to say thank you. It really means a lot for you to spend this time with our audience and for you to hang out at the Not Your Average Investor studio here. We appreciate you.
It's my pleasure. And, thanks for all the great things you guys do.
All right. If you want to be the president of an NFL team, you got to treat everybody like they're an important relationship. You got to think long term, and you can't be average. See you next time.